Ballpark Nation presents. Welcome to Go Astros, your look at the two-time World Series champions from three guys who have been here since Art Howe had hair.
Good morning, everybody. This is Go Astros. Brian Arbor is with us, and Andy, Brian got smart, and he got about as far away from the Astros as you can get.
So, A, that's a general good idea, and then B, he went to Hawaii, which is an even better idea. So, really, sorry, folks, you're stuck with the less smart on this podcast. But I will note, you're going to Hawaii this week?
I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm just expecting Andy to come back with like somewhat longer hair with like beads in it. Like, I think he's going to go full native. I think it's good for him. I think he needs that in his life.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Brian. So it has been a rough week since we last chatted. The Astros have only won 2 games in that period of time. And as is on brand for this season, at least 4 of those losses, they had leads in at some point and did not close it out. So what is happening? Or what's going on? I don't even know.
And the offense picked a really bad week to have a slump.
Really bad week.
Yeah, because they got 6 quality starts this week. We said it a week ago, and we said, hey, the Astros are going to get 6 quality starts. You're like, okay, they'll lose a close one in there, but that's a good formula for a 5-2 week. And instead, we sit here on the other side. They scored 18 runs. So as much as people want to talk about Ryan Presley or the error by the defense or stuff others you've been talking about that and your things we talked about in the short hops this week, really the problem is the offense just took a week off. And I guess the other problem is they can't afford that right now.
You've talked all season about the difference between the emotional hole and the real hole. The hole actually is starting to feel real to me. I mean, at this point now, you're 7.5 back. We are already into June, and it's not over by any stretch, but it's starting to feel like the leeway is evaporating quickly.
Yeah, and one of the things I talked a lot about the emotional early in the season, but they got so far down so quickly that one of the things I quickly realized is they have to play like some of the best teams in franchise history to get to a point where they'll be in playoff contention, and they did that for a while there.
They did it for 15 games.
They had a 15-game stretch. They went 10-5. They were playing sort of well. And they're still, again, overall, they're not scoring runs, but batting average on base, they should be scoring more runs than they actually are overall. Not the case this week. They hit poorly this week, with the exception of all the home runs on, I guess it was Saturday.
Yeah.
They can't afford really any more weeks like this. We've talked about their need to sort of stack series wins. And if you win series, you're winning, 2/3 of your games. They kind of need to win 2/3 of their games or something like that to end up over 90 wins, where we kind of think they need to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, and of course, a couple of those series in there are against teams that they really should have beaten and didn't. And that's always going to come back and kind of bite you in the rear end.
Yeah, and again, one of their big issues is they have a terrible record in 1-run games. A lot of that is just, coin flips, balls finding holes, things like that. But, that tells you that, over the long run, that's going to even out. But the long run may involve a future season at this point.
the long run might be 2025. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Look, you mentioned and you let Presley off the hook a bit, and I do appreciate that. Although I'll disagree in the sense that if a starter loses 3-2, then I will go and look at the offense. But the job of the bullpen is to hold whatever lead you have. And the fact that this has happened now twice in 4 games, not even 4 appearances, but twice in 4 games, 2 appearances in a row, is part of the reason why. Read the tea leaves for me. It's part of the reason why Hader was signed, because the Astros started to see some of this decline in Presley.
I mean, depends on your definition of decline, because if you look at his strikeout rate, it's 11 per 9. There's a little bit of leakage in his walk rate, but mostly it's balls are finding holes on Presley. Now, as you say, the job of a bullpen guy, particularly a high leverage bullpen guy, is to get outs and not give up runs. And these are the people you put in tie games or 1-run games because you expect them to keep the score where it is, to not give up a run. So again, from the long run, I think Presley's fine. From a short-term perspective, yeah, this week was a disaster for him. But again, my focus on who am I going to blame for this week? It's the offense. The bats didn't show up this week. So we basically put too much pressure on the bats, put too much pressure on Ryan Presley.
No, I mean, that's fair. Okay, let's talk the elephant in any room he's in is Jose Abreu. You know, he had the home run, but like I was there for that, and it got out of here because baseball's weird that way. It's not like he really drove it. It was an opposite field shot that I think cleared the wall by feet. Overall, how much longer do you think the Jose Abreu's leash is, or do you think is it like, did that home run buy him another week, or
yeah? What's
your take on that?
There is one person who can answer that question, and that's the guy who's got to eat his contract. That's the owner. Yeah. So obviously there's pressure that builds up from the team and from what Joe Espada, Dana Brown, other people in the front office, other of Jim Crane's advisors. It's a very, there's no sort of like single person, I think, is going to go to Jim Crane with that sort of option. But the question becomes sort of how much money. So did it buy him an extra week? I suspect it probably did, because again, and again, this isn't. We would say this about any owner. This isn't a very sort of specific thing. Owners don't like spending money on nothing.
Yeah.
And they're not unreasonable to want that. So the last person who's it's easy. Again, the last person to say that Jose Abreu's got to go is Jim Crane, because again, it's his money. So did it buy him an extra week? I can't give you an intelligent answer, a true answer on that, because you can only read his tea leaves, and he doesn't talk a lot, which is probably what I do as owner too.
Yeah. But as opposed to the owner in Dallas that runs a football team who can't get off a microphone. Yeah, yes. Definitely. Now, Loperfido they're making a concerted effort. He's back in AAA of playing first base. That's probably as big a sign as any that there's at least a conversation happening. Yeah. And again, it also sort of gives you an indication that baseball operations. So what goes on in the minor league system is the least imprint of Jim Crane, and it is the most imprint of Dana Brown, and playing Joe Loperfido at first. And the other thing to note here is that John Singleton probably better at picking up scoops than Jose Abreu, but neither one has good range at first base. So one hope is that you get some better defensive play, some better range at first base, better ability to, get those hard hit balls to first base. That had Abreu played a little better defense in the first game, that might have helped us in that game, because that was, he let a couple balls go through that I think other first baseman would have gotten. Yeah, they weren't exactly errors, but they really were plays that maybe should have been made. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, you think you're right too. I think the biggest thing Singleton did bring to the table was he at least made the routine scoops that he needed to make. And that's something that Abreu has struggled with. Yeah. But for first baseman have poor range. Yeah. And it's something that is, again, it's an additional thing that's hurt in addition to Abreu's poor bat this season. One of the things that I've been appreciative of Dana Brown this season, well, since his tenure really, is he at least makes an attempt to be more transparent. He will talk about frustrations. He'll talk about needs. I think he's way better about it than Well, then the Astros have allowed anybody to be before. I won't say that James Click or Lunau were intentionally vague. It's just that was the policy. The lack of wanting to discuss Urquidy and Javier has me as stressed out about as anything. The fact that I don't think we still have an answer. They were waiting for second opinions. Is there what would you handicap seeing either of those guys again this season?
I mean, the reason you get a second opinion is because you didn't like the first opinion, at least medically. And considering they haven't told us anything, that means either they're seeking a third, fourth, fifth. They're trying to find somebody to say something nicer, or what's likely to what may happen is the next announcement we get is one of those two, possibly both, went through surgery today. So I think that's much more likely than, at the end of the 15 days, Javier will be back on the mound. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully we're just reading the tea leaves wrong, because obviously all we're doing is reading tea leaves. But that they haven't told us anything, that they've blown past their deadline for supposedly telling us something, can't be a good sign.
Yeah. Of course, I am reminded of the excellent Curb Your Enthusiasm episode when he kept getting second opinions for everything. I thought that was, I don't know. Anytime I can be reminded of Curb, the day isn't too bad. Looks like Jordan's coming out of it. He's getting on base, but he's started to look a lot more like Jordan, particularly Saturday when he was just smoking the baseballs. I was at the game with my father-in-law, and we were both laughing about how, it's one thing for the pitcher not even to look, but the right fielder, just for the right fielder for Minnesota, just turned around and watched. There was no attempt to even drift back. It was as gone as a girl can get, if we're quoting George Strait. Feels good at least to see him starting to hit the ball again.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my aesthetically favorite home runs is being in the ballpark and watching an outfielder not move. It's just when the outfielder knows off the bat. And aside, it tells you how desperate the elimination game of the World Series is that Matt Vierling tried to go back on that ball that Jordan hit in Game 6 of the World Series.
The one that went 500 feet.
Dude. I don't.
Not to mention high. What are you going to do?
But in favorite, I saw him hit one 2021 in Yankee Stadium. We just watched Aaron Judge just stand there. Yeah, that's quite impressive. I enjoyed. It shouldn't happen to me, but I enjoyed enjoy watching that. And again,
majestic.
Yeah, and if you look at Jordan last month, it wasn't that he was getting hits and he was strikeout rate was sort of normal. It just he wasn't driving the ball, so it was really good to see him drive the ball on Saturday, and hopefully that portends a really effective month of June driving the ball. Because as good as his swing is, as much as he controls the plate, Jordan doesn't slump that much. It's just he's off just that much.
Well, speaking of, it does look like at least we're getting the second signs of Bregman coming out of it again. He had that stretch, I think, of about 3 or 4 games, and then he went right back into the tank. But it seems like, again, he's put together at least 3 or 4 games where he's hitting with power. In many ways, of all the things we've discussed, and all the issues with the offense, it kind of comes down to Alex Bregman. If Alex Bregman has even a bit better year, you might be talking about 5 or 6 more wins the other direction.
Yeah, in Bregman, one is he's at a key spot in the lineup. He's hitting behind both Tucker and Jordan, who are, as we just talked with Jordan, and obviously I think Tucker leads the league in walks. They're getting on base.
Yeah.
And then Bregman's been, Bregman's slump. And it's the thing that has been most sort of structurally, like I said, the team, hey, they're really good. They're really good numbers, and batting average, on base, slugging is just not in run. So that will come around over the long term. It's Bregman's sort of the one sort of structural issue with the offense. Is he this, has he somehow lost his step, or lost a bit of bat speed, or lost something that's, making him sort of worse off? And this is an encouraging week to say that no, he's going to get back to being Alex Bregman soon enough. And again, the team desperately needs that, not just because in general they need anything, but he's at a real key. Assuming he hits 4th or 5th, he'll get plenty of opportunities with runners on base.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's been the most frustrating is even in the years when he was having his slow starts, he was still able to make productive outs, and he's not even doing that. I mean, we've recorded on the show the number of RBI opportunities he's left on the field and then when you lose by a run, it's easy to go back and be like, if you would just hit it shallow fly ball to center, you maybe score that run.
Yeah. Again, in the emotional hole, it feels like he leads the league in pop-ups with runners on base.
Right.
I suspect that's not actually true, but I don't want to look that up because it feels right.
Because it feels right, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit of good news, though. Jake Myers, and I have been, I'm able to admit when I'm wrong, and I kind of thought that injury in 2021 had killed his career. It does feel like finally he's back. He's a productive hitter. He's hitting for average. He's hitting for power. He's literally running into center field walls. That was an amazing catch that really just the entire Minute Maid Park held its breath. But in many ways, Jake Myers is becoming the player you thought he would be since we've been doing this show.
Yeah, I've always been a Jake Myers optimist. And again, I mean, part of that is that he's an outstanding defensive center fielder. There's often too much talk about his arm, which is it's not nothing, but it's your least important skill in the outfield. And the biggest thing about Jake Myers is he's at 8.2% walk rate. That would be a career high after 7.6 last season. So he's walking more. And more importantly, strikeout rate 19.5%, which is right about, I think, just below league average. So one of the big things when Jake Myers was sort of slumping and sort of holding down the offense is he'd strike out a ton.
Yeah.
And, he's able to not only make contact, but he's making really good contact. And when you combine that with his outstanding range in center field, it makes him an exceedingly valuable player. If he can add offense, I just expect him to be a league average hitter. If he adds that with his, with the defense, hey, that's something right there. And again, try to focus on what players can do rather than what they can't do. And I think Jake's always gotten a little sort of too much because this sort of negativity including from, sometimes it seemed like the manager of the front office too.
Right.
And now it's, he is a valuable person in the lineup. He's hitting, I think he hit 5th the other day. So again, you can sort of see the big help he is to the team when he can do both of those skills.
Yeah, I mean, just talking about the Bregman struggles again, like I feel like I would trust him or Pena up with, I just need to put the bat on the ball more than Bregman right now. Although, again, he seems to be turning it around. Okay, so the knee-jerk reaction is always to blame the manager. And I'm just watching these games, and yeah, there maybe as a choice here and there. They maybe, if they pinch ran for Abreu yesterday, maybe they'd score that run on the fly ball. I don't think so, but maybe. But how do we judge, in your estimation, whether or not a manager's doing a good job or not? And do you feel like Espada meets that criteria?
Yeah, this is difficult because the major job of major league managers, I said major twice there, I should edit that. But the most important job of a major league manager is not the strategy. It is his relations in the clubhouse. It's his ability to get the team pulling in the right direction and to get people to whatever sort of issues they're having, hey, I don't like, I wish I was playing more. I wish I was this spot in the lineup, or, my wife and I got in a fight last night and I'm just annoyed right now. I'm just having a bad day, is to be able to put that aside and to focus on baseball and playing for the team and sort of reduce sort of tension in the clubhouse. Is he doing that? I don't know. It's really sort of hard for us to tell. There's nothing that sort of has bubbled to the surface that's real sort of obvious in sort of people.
Except for the Heyman report.
Nightingale.
Nightingale.
Right. The Nightingale report, which is not nothing, right? Because again, I talked about how Nightingale has the best sources in the Astros front office. And so there's probably something there. What I don't know is if 4 players went last year and it just never got reported, or 8 players went in, whatever year, or I'm sure 25 players went in 2012 or something, but
yeah.
I had gone to management in 20. We all went to management in 2012.
Trade me, please.
Yeah, I don't know sort of how to compare this. I also don't know if that's, it's also just like, hey, can you tell him that he needs to do X, Y, or Z better because he's still thinking about this as a bench coach? And that got sort of blown up or misinterpreted in the game of telephone to the reporter, right? There's all sorts of of interpretations there. So at one level, I don't know, right? In the end, this is a veteran team that expects to win. So if it continues to be below 500, hey, they may just want someone else for the sake of someone else.
Yeah, I think it's a great point because he's a rookie manager, which means there's nothing to fall back on, and the team is underperforming, and it's underperforming in many ways from players that are in their prime. So what is the one thing you can change?
Yeah.
And maybe, I feel like his job, what he's got to deal with this season is even harder than Dusty's job in 2020. Like it was still a team that was not, I think, angry to prove something after everything came out. This just feels like, I don't know, it feels almost apathetic, which I know we can't diagnose from here, but that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, and the other part of it was a continuity hire, which is to say they didn't turn over anybody. They didn't turn over the pitching coach or the hitting coach. The bench coach was the first base coach last year. There's almost no turnover in the coaching staff, which is mostly, I think, Dana Brown made this decision that, things are going well and we should, we don't have the manager anymore, but we should keep everything else going, which I think actually increases the chances that, at the end of the season, they say, let's just get some new voices in here and try that. Will that happen? I don't know. And obviously it depends on what happens over the next, the next 110 games. But obviously that's a possibility. But I think it's mostly based on expectations. And again, the context of, this being a continuity hire.
Okay. So is there a universe where you can see either a manager or a hitting coach, a replacement midseason to kind of just shock the system a little bit, get a different voice in there? Because for all the bemoaning that we're doing, they're still very much they're a good week away from being right back in this thing.
What's Phil Garner doing?
Getting older, Brian. He's
well, aren't we all?
Aren't we all? Yeah.
Hey, Art Howe's right there. So, and your student could learn actually who Art, not Art Who, but Art Howe. It's all a possibility, right? For the exact reason you said, right? That this team, maybe it needs a jolt. Working against that, right? Jose Altuve, does he seem like a player who's ever needed a jolt in his career?
No.
Someone who is exceedingly steady, right? Is someone who, it's possible he's thrown a bat or something in a clubhouse at some point in his career, but we've never heard about it, right? It's not someone who I think is emotional mood. Alex Bregman, he's going to work harder because he has a new, this isn't the personality, particularly some of the leaders of this team. So that may not be the right thing. On the other hand, maybe that's just what they need. I mean, again, 2022, I talked about the World Series. We played the Phillies in the World Series that year. And they made a managerial change in June.
Yeah.
Going from Joe Girardi to Rob Thompson. And that really seemed to be effective and work. The one note is they went from a very different personality. So maybe they want to hire Joe Girardi because that's not Joe Espada's personality. And maybe they're just limited to hiring managers named Joe.
Well, looking at the schedule, at least for the month of June, I mean, it's not different than what we were saying before. The Astros have a very favorable schedule this coming month with really just 3 games against the Orioles that screams this could be an issue. And then if you look at Seattle, and Seattle's got looks to be a bit tougher road both in June and in July. So it's still all right there. So at what point do you think the Astros have to start making those decisions about, hey, we are going to become sellers? Or do you think all these one run losses that you always acknowledge as a coin flip, is that also enough reason to say we really are a few bounces from being in a way different position?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it'll take it will take a lot for them to make a big decision to blow the team up, in part because they've already spent so much money on 2025.
And 2025's got a good core coming back. You can build off.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, do you want to sort of, there's no sort of sense that this season has to be the end. There are decisions they need to make, particularly about how to deal with third base in the future. But everything else should be coming back. And again, they've got a lot of sort of payroll spent on this. And also, there's reason to think 2024 and 2024, even if it's a lost season, that 2025 could be better than what's going on in the future, because future stars coming up through the system, they don't seem to have a lot of them, though they are able to manufacture those better than most other teams. So hopefully that continues. But if you're sort of thinking ahead, future, they may make some moves around they could make some move around the edges, but I think the decision to do that, so one is, if I'm in the front office, I've got people sort of researching, I've got people researching potential deals for trading away players, but I've also got people researching potential deals for sort of adding players, because you have to sort of do both. The final decision won't happen until after the All-Star break.
Yeah, and there's no scenario where they should blow up. You can maybe see some trading on the edges to bring in some farm depth, but yeah, I can't see any major decisions to blow anything up. All right, so we got 3 against the old rival. The Cardinals are back in town, and then you guys will be back on the air after 3 against the Cardinals and 3 against the Angels. What do you feel like the Astros need to do in these next 6 to make you feel like, okay, there's still a run left in these guys?
4-2. And so we've got to stack series wins together. So let's try to win both of these series. Anything above that would be gravy. Anything below that would be, of course, worrisome to the chances. They've, it's bad week. I think their playoff chances moved down from like 50% to 30% on Fangraphs this week. So it's and also my expectation is they have to sort of move up steadily.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be. The cliche is one game at a time, but it's one game at a time, and you still have 6 or 7 games against the Mariners. You can, and you. It's so funny. It's so sad, I guess, because all those games were very close too. And to your point on Fangraphs, when they went in that Mariners series pretty much even as far as Fangraphs projections, and then all hell broke loose. All right, that's going to wrap us up today. Before we get out of here, though, I want to do a shout out to She Does It. She's got her show, Breaking Balls Podcast, and she had an interview with Lindsey Hill, who was very much involved in the Trevor Bauer scandal issue. She is this is her first time she's broken the silence on this show, so it's definitely something you should be checking out. Just follow @BreakBallsPod and check it out. And Brian, any last thoughts?
Well, one, Emily, despite being a Yankees fan, is an excellent follow, so I recommend that. And we'll forgive her for her Yankees fandom.
I'm sure she appreciates that.
Yeah. And again, hey, the good news is we're getting really good starts from Spencer Arrighetti. We didn't mention his name on this podcast. And it's been, again, sort of frustrating because, again, it's not getting rewarded, but he's turning into one of our better pitchers. And that, I think, is exceeded my expectations for him this season. So that's encouraging. May keep it up because rotation depth is an issue.
Rotation depth is an issue. We'll see if Andy went native next week, or is it going to be Brian doing the show by himself? I will see everybody back in 2 weeks. And until then, guys, Go Astros.
Aloha, Jim.